Ladies and gentlemen, Champions League is back, better and newer than ever. We've kind of moved away from the group stage. We now have this league format where every single team plays one team once. And at the end of the league, I guess the team's the most amount of points goes through. Simple enough, onto the round of 16. But what we just witnessed was kind of like the first iteration. I don't want to call it the first match day because there's still a few games on Wednesday and on Thursday to go through. But we saw a lot of teams kind of in action. And at first I thought, should we do like individual game recaps? And I kind of thought maybe for the first one, let's try and do like a short but concise summary of the main talking points that we kind of got from Tuesday's Champions League action. We'll say 5 things we learned, or the 5 big talking points. I want to start in Madrid because obviously when you talk about the Champions League, Real Madrid has to be the first name on everybody's lips. They are, of course, the holders. They are, of course, the eternal lovers and the eternal romantics of this competition. Is it 14, 15 times now? It's something ridiculous. Regardless, right? They're the team to beat. But it's been a bit of a rough start to the season of Real Madrid. Obviously, the main arrival being Kylian Mbappe, that long-awaited pursuit has kind of came to an end, and he is now a Real Madrid player. But anybody who was kind of thinking that this was going to be a match made in heaven from the very first kick has clearly been wrong here, right? There's inevitably going to be a gelling in period where the team learns to incorporate Kylian and Kylian learns how to embed himself the best way he can in the Madrid team. That's not something that happens overnight, quite clearly. And look, the first 2 games in La Liga, the Super Cup for half the game, large periods of this game as well too, are full proof that this is going to be a process for Real Madrid. And the potential for this team is absolutely scary because you look at what they have, who's managing them, how good they can all be individually. You can just imagine that if they are able to find the perfect chemistry, the perfect formula to mix all of these crazy ingredients together, you're going to have the best dish on the planet. Mbappe, Jude, Vini, Rodrigo, Tchouameni, Valverde, the list goes on and on and on, right? But it hasn't been easy, right? It's been slow, it's been lethargic, there's been defensive holes, there's been lack of communication in attack, there's been players bumping into each other. And you know what, right? I think obviously the big guy is Kylian, and that's supposed to be like a Champions League winner, getting probably the best player in the world, arguably, should be, wow, the best get even better. But I think, for how difficult it's proving to be to kind of mesh him in to what they already have, something that I think largely went under the radar, like he almost did his entire career, but is clearly a big miss for Real Madrid at the moment, is Toni Kroos's retirement at the tail end of last season. And like I said, always kind of like understated Toni Kroos, never the loudest, never the most extravagant on the pitch, wasn't someone who's scoring or assisting at will, but he was the heartbeat of that Real Madrid team. He was the metronome. He was the guy making everything tick, making everyone around him have an easier job. And I think not only him leaving, but the failure to kind of replace how good on the ball this guy was, it's proving to be quite difficult for Real Madrid, right? Because every single team needs players like Toni Kroos who are willing to be selfless. They're willing to do the dirty work. They're willing to kind of be the one keeping everything ticking. And they never get the headlines. Let's be real. Toni Kroos went his entire career without being the man, the guy on everybody's lips, a Ballon d'Or contender or winner. But they are vitally, vitally important, and his absence and Real Madrid's struggle since his absence is proving exactly that. Now, look, this game against Stuttgart had a lot of people thinking, could this be the game that Real Madrid finally click? And look, we're going to every game thinking that. I'm watching Real Madrid a lot this season because every time I want to see the best players in the world do their thing, but I've left almost every single game feeling a bit underwhelmed, wanting more, expecting more. And maybe people thought that return to Champions League, return to their favorite competition could be the kind of spark that raises Real again. But I think one thing that this game proved, or should have proved to everybody, is that, guys, this is not going to be something that overnight just switches. It's not going to be like one game Real Madrid are figuring it out and the next game they're going to be unstoppable, invincible. That's not how football works, and that's not how Carlo Ancelotti operates. One thing that Carlo Ancelotti always gets hit with is he has no tactics. He just has the best players in the world and just tells them to do their thing. It's a myth, and honestly, it's a myth that's kind of being proven to be a myth based on this season. He still needs guys in certain positions, and he still needs a certain balance to his team to even allow those great players to be able to have the space and the freedom and the luxury to do what they want and do the individual things that make them brilliant. But if you don't have a base, a platform to a house, there's no point in having a flat screen TV. There's no point in having the best fridge. There's no point in having 20 sofas. If you don't have the platform, the foundation, The rest doesn't matter, bro. The house is eventually going to fall down. And what are you going to do with all that fancy furniture then? He's trying. And look, if anyone can do it, it is Carlo Ancelotti, right? Like he's coached the best players throughout his career, and he's almost always found a way of finding a winning formula. But like I said, this is going to be it's going to be something that, look, I've said repeatedly, I'm willing to give Real Madrid 10 to 15 games. Let's see how long. Let's see if in 10 to 15 games can Real Madrid kind of find their mojo, find the winning formula. If it doesn't happen then look, I think he's really trying to make it work with a set group of players. And of course, Jude's absence the first few weeks hasn't made it any easier. But I'm of the firm belief, just like every great team, someone has to sacrifice. And it might be a sacrifice in role. It might be a sacrifice in terms of position on the pitch. There might be a point in the season where one of the big dogs is no longer able to start for Real Madrid. Not because they're not good enough to start for Real Madrid, and not because they're not a good player, but for the sake of the team needs a different guy to come in who might not be as talented as the one he's replacing, but helps the overall vision of the team and helps the overall shape and just makes things tick a little better. One guy that's definitely not going to be is Fede. I think he's proven that he's invaluable. And guys like Mbappe and Vinny, they're the faces of the team. They're the best players in the world. They will play. Jude, regardless, as well, it's the same too. But the others, I think one of them will have to give, unfortunately. But that's the sacrifices you have to make if you want to be great, man. Shout out to Courtois, who is just the ultimate insurance policy. And it proves how great this Real Madrid team are, that they were able to win the Champions League last season largely without him. But make no mistake about it. Shout out Lunin. You were a very, very able deputy. But Courtois is the man. And this guy saved Real Madrid last night, as did Rudiger, playing with, again, several partners in central defense. Obviously, Militao was out, grabs the winner at the end as well, too. But look, first thing I learned is that Real Madrid, don't just think because they're back in the Champions League that things are going to be all rosy. This is a grind. This is a grind. Being great doesn't happen overnight. And I think Real Madrid fans are very quick. Oh, they know that, man. Come on. They've watched so many successful teams. Who am I to tell Real Madrid fans what it takes to be successful? But for the rest of the world who keep tuning in to watch Real Madrid, hoping to be amazed, it's a grind. It's not going to happen overnight. The second thing we learned is that AC Milan, how the mighty have fallen, man. And I'm not even talking about how the mighty have fallen since 2007 when they last won the Champions League, how the mighty have fallen since they last had a Ballon d'Or winner, which coincidentally was that same year in Ricardo Kaká. Forget about all that. That's we're talking 20 years ago, right? But even since their last Scudetto win under Pioli, under the management of Paolo Maldini, this is like a team that is just night and day from that group of players. And obviously there's been a lot of guys coming in. There's been a lot of guys coming out. Maldini has been one of them. Pioli has been one of them. But wow. I think Milan at that point in time were really a group that, yes, they had won the Scudetto, but also you kind of got the impression that this is a team that can continue to grow. It was a very young team. It was a very exciting team. And it was a team that, look, with more investment and with more ambition, they can maybe one day reach a team able to compete in Serie A, in Champions League yet again. But since that moment, right, there's been changes in management, there's been changes in managers, there's been changes in players, and Milan at the moment are, for me, a club that are really just sinking like a stone. And I feel for Milan fans, right? Obviously, 1 win in 5 this year, 1 win in Serie A against bottom of the league Venezia. They opened the scoring very early on in this game against Liverpool. They looked bright opening exchanges, but once Arne Slot made one little tactical adjustment, Milan couldn't get their hands on Liverpool. It was men versus boys. And this is, look, again, Liverpool are a better team than Milan, similar to how Liverpool are a better team than United, but also the gap in coaching between Fonseca on the night and Arne Slot was just, again, it's men versus boys. The guy couldn't come near Arne Slot tactically. And you look at this group that at one point their midfield was Benasser, Cassier, and Tonali. 2 of those guys are no longer at the club. One of them in Tonali, I'm sure Milan fans have nightmares about that sale. A boyhood Milan supporter who never probably wanted to leave the club but was sold for profit, and the money was spent on a few players that, let's be real, can't lace Tonali's boots. Kessié has obviously left. Benasser spends more time in the hospital bed than he does on the pitch these days, unfortunately. And then you look at really the 3 prized assets of this club, right? The 3 guys who represent Milan. The 3 guys who are the faces of the franchise, if you want to use American terminology here, right? In Mike Maignan, Theo Hernandez, and Rafael Leao. Those are the 3 guys that, look, if Milan were to ever sell them, first of all, it'd be a disaster and the fans would probably riot, but you could get maybe upwards of 70 million plus for all 3 of them each. Mike Maignan, as a goalkeeper, is a tremendously talented goalkeeper, but the guy can't stay fit. I've never seen in my life an injury-prone goalkeeper. He must have fell to his knees like 4 times in that game, and it's not something we've never seen before. Mania is injury prone. That's an issue. You look at Theo Hernandez for France, and in the past for Milan has looked like the best left back in the world. But his star seems to kind of dwindle every time he plays for Milan these days. Honestly, man, like it's a shadow of the guy that we see for the French national team and for the one that lifted the Scudetto a few years ago. And then Leao is so frustrating, but also I feel for him as well too, because clearly he's the most talented player on the team. He's one of the most talented players in the world, but it's a player without really the platform behind him to kind of be able to show his best week in, week out. I don't think anyone can deny that. He had a few moments in that game against Liverpool where he looked like one of the best forwards in the world. When he kind of hit the upright of the bar, when he dribbled past almost the entirety of the Liverpool team before Konate bravely stopped him. He has moments like that show real quality. But there are also moments where, look, I think even Milan's fans have to say, right, he is talented, but I think he takes liberties during games. And what do I mean by that? I think maybe he could exert a little bit more over a 90-minute game. He is at this current moment. And again, like I said, I feel for him, because when your team and your manager are as bad as they are, everything is expected to go through you. There's only so much you can do, right? But I feel like he does coast through games at times. And I do feel like it's more moments with him rather than really taking hold of football games, which we saw him do a few years ago. And we still see him do in moments. Like, he shows in moments why, if a team wanted him, they'd probably have to pay 100 million plus. But I just think for a player of that quality, the demand is a little bit more. I think that's the way I look at every single player that I view as an elite level talent. I view Leao like that in terms of the athleticism. The guy's a beast. And then in terms of his technique, he can dribble through the best of them. He can finish. He can create. He is really, for me, a forward that doesn't really lack any technical or physical qualities in his game. But the mental side of the game, like the will to want to get on the ball and just make things happen all the time, like Vinicius, for example, you could make the argument that Leao, again, this might sound crazy, but you can make the argument Leao has more to his game than Vinicius in terms of attributes. But Vinicius has this mentality that he always wants to get on the ball, and he always wants it. He always wants to take on his man and dribble and beat players. I don't think Leao kind of has that killer in him. And does that come under a different manager, under a different club, with more expectation? Like if he went to Arsenal, right? Would Arteta kind of stand for what he's doing at Milan? And would he kind of put a fire in his belly to get the best out of Leao? Maybe. But for what we're seeing right now, I always leave watching Milan games wanting a little bit more. But that's not even to make this the Leao show, right? Leao is the least of Milan's problems. Fonseca, man, this is a guy that is running out of time quickly. Like I said, 1 win in 5. The football has been dire. The fans are already on his back. You saw them boo the team off after the game against Liverpool, and it's not getting any easier. They're playing Inter, the Derby della Madonnina, as they call it, at the weekend. Last year, they got destroyed. And in fact, I think they haven't beat Inter in seasons now. Inter have just pummeled them every single time they've met. And last year, I was at that first game where Milan and Inter beat them, I think 5-1. Like, they can't afford a repeat of that performance and a repeat of that result at the weekend, because Fonseca already is running out of time. A massive loss to your city rivals like that, you're cooked. But again, I just look at Milan. I look at the team that they've built. It's squad building with very little ambition. You look at the players that they've sold and the ones they've replaced them with. Like, it's a team built largely of Chelsea's rejects. Like, let's call it what it is. I understand Milan are not the most financially superior team. They can't afford to go buy Mbappe or whatever, right? But you look at their team, it's littered with players that couldn't make it at Chelsea, who are, let's face it, 6th place around that area in England. Should a team of the quality of Milan really be settling for another team's kind of scraps? For me, no. I mean, I would rather see a Milan team that really try and find the best young talents in Italy, like Juventus have. And we're going to talk about Juventus in a bit, but you look at Juve, right? And okay, their financial situation is a bit different, but they've also went and looked at the scope of the league and said, who can we identify are the best Italian young talents and the best talents in Serie A, period. And they've built a really, really good team that gives Thiago Motta a fighting chance against the teams in Italy and against the teams in Europe. I look at Milan, and I think the squad building is extremely, extremely underwhelming for me. And I think they're still relying really on the big three to kind of build them out of games. But I think they will really struggle this year. And I don't see Fonseca lasting past December, personally, if he even gets that far. So Milan, look, the name is beautiful. The stadium is even better. But when you look at Milan versus Liverpool, it's really the allure of the two teams that are kind of drawing you towards that game. And it's not really the quality of Milan that kind of brings them to you too. So disappointing. Let's transition to Juve, though. Obviously, the other Italian team I was kind of alluding to. And everything I'm saying about Milan, you could have maybe said about Juve the last few seasons, right? They've had so many different managers. Max Allegri has come back. He's left just as quickly. But Juve, I came into the season saying for me are the most intriguing team in Europe this year. And it's because it's almost a completely different squad and club than it was 12 months ago, right? Thiago Motta has come in after doing such a brilliant job of Bologna last year, leading them to the Champions League for the first time. And he's come in, he's obviously a bright, young, exciting, innovative manager, and he's come in and made splashes in the transfer market, right? You look at the players that Juve have kind of acquired this year. First of all, they've got rid of so much deadwood. So many players that have just been languishing on the Juve wage bill. Alexandro, Wojciech Szczesny obviously retiring, Adrian Rabiot, obviously Chiesa, maybe a little less so, but obviously they offloaded him as well too. And you look at who they've replaced them with, right? In midfield in particular is probably where you've seen the biggest change with Douglas Luiz, Koop Miners, Catherine Thuram. In attack, they've bought big as well too. Conceição. They bought Nico Gonzalez, who yesterday, I mean, I think Juve fans are a little, not weirded out, but like apprehensive about that signing. But I think he's looked really good since he joined Juve. It's just a really, really promising team. Obviously, De Gregorio in goal. Like I said, they've just gone around Italy and picked out the best young talents and built a very, very good squad. And I think that's what all the best teams in their league should be doing. Bayern do that in the Bundesliga. Juve used to do that in Serie A. PSG are starting to do that in France. You guys have a stranglehold over the rest of the division. Take advantage of it. And I think Juve have done a really good job about that. But for me, the one kid that is shining above anybody, 19-year-old Kenan Yildiz, the Turkish international, had a really promising Euro campaign with Turkey. Saw flashes of him last season. He is young, like I said, 19 years old. But at 19, he's already been given the fabled, historic number 10 kit. Alex Del Piero's number 10. Some of the greatest players in history have worn the number 10 for Juve. And Yildiz has kind of been like enshrined to be the next to do it. That's not a kit that they give anybody, right? So to give Yildiz, a player like that responsibility is a massive honor, but also like a massive weight on his shoulders that he has to carry. But you look at this first game, right? First Champions League goal for him, and the way he took it, it's actually vintage Del Piero fashion, right? Shifts in, shifts out, curls it off the post, in and out, even the celebration, tongue out, it's vintage ADP. And I think he's a kid with a massive, massive future. We've seen glimpses of him in the last 12 months when he was wearing the number 15, but I think he's going to take it up another level this year. And I think Thiago Motta is the perfect manager to kind of get the best out of him. Like, no disrespect to Allegri, his history in Serie A is unquestionable, right? He's won so many Scudettos, led Juve to so much success, but I think Thiago Motta is the right guy to kind of lead Juve into this new era. And with these young players that Juve have at their disposal, I think he's the right guy to kind of get the best out of them as well too. And for me, I just look at Juve and I'm like, imagine they had just kept Matteo Sule and the kid that went to Huijsen, who went to Bournemouth, right? If they had kept those two, I think they would have been even better. But clearly there's a massive improvement on Juve, who 2 years ago, right, they lost to Maccabi Haifa in the Champions League. A year after that, didn't even qualify for the competition. Now they're back in the big time, dismantling PSV, who are Eredivisie champions. I think Juve could really do something in this competition this year. Not saying they're going to win it, but under Thiago Motta, Juve seem fun again. They seem like a show that you kind of want to go pay admission fee to go and watch. And I don't think you've been able to say that about Juve for a very long time. So Juve, most interesting, intriguing team for me in Europe. And I think matchday 1 kind of showed that. Let's take it to Germany, where Bayern Munich dismantled, that's even an understatement, demolished Dinamo Zagreb 9-2 on the night, a week after beating Holstein Kiel 6-1 in the Bundesliga. Vincent Kompany's men, bro, like they've started the season on fire, especially in front of goal. Harry Kane bagging back-to-back hat tricks. Even though this one, I can't lie, 4 goals, impressive, but 3 of them were penalties. One of them was basically putting it into an empty net. They get it how you live, as I always say. But yeah, he's in red hot form in front of goal. And yeah, man, Bayern, they just, this is for me Champions League history, right? It's heritage. Bayern Munich in the first phase of Champions League always seem to demolish the group stage, and now demolishing the first phase of the Champions League. Like, I've seen Bayern just absolutely put like 5, 6, 7 easily against these minnows in Europe, and it seems to be no different under Vincent Kompany. Now Bayern, their team that did a lot of business this year, brought in Michael Olise, brought in Palinha. Like, it's a team that are clearly reeling off last season, finishing trophyless, and they don't want to make that same mistake twice. Now, Vincent Kompany is somebody that I'm a little apprehensive about, right? First of all, no matter what Bayern and Elber try and tell me, he wasn't their first choice. He probably wasn't even their first 5 choices, but he's the man that Bayern have decided to go with. And I'm not going to judge him entirely on being relegated with Burnley, because let's be honest, it's Burnley. Just like I'm not going to judge him entirely on being promoted with Burnley. It's Burnley. But one thing about Kompany that you have to respect, this is a man with a lot of presence. This is a man with a lot of respect in the game. He's a leader. He's vocal. He knows German. He knows the Bundesliga, his time at Hamburg. And he's a winner. He might not be a winner as a manager yet. He hasn't had much experience, but he's a winner as a player. And he will demand winning respect. I don't know if he's ready for this kind of job. or if maybe his name has kind of helped him get to this point. And I need to see more from Bayern this year. The last 2 results have been impressive. To score, 15 goals in 2 games is outrageous, no matter what the opponent is. But I'm remaining calm, to be honest with you. They have a lot of talent. Everyone knows Jamal Musiala is my favorite player in the game. They have world-class players all over the pitch. And one thing I've noticed about Bayern, they've changed the system and the team quite a lot this year. You look at some games, it's been Palhinha. Some games, it's been Pavlovic. Some games, it's been Sasha Boe. Some games, like this last one, was Rafael Guerrero. One game, it's Matthias Tell. The next game, it's Serge Gnabry or Coleman or Leroy Sané. So I think Kompany is still trying to figure out this team, still trying to figure out what his best cast of characters kind of looks like, but it's been a good start. But like I said, people have been asking me who are my favorites for the Champions League. I haven't put Bayern there yet. And a big part of that is how will Vincent Kompany fare against the best teams in the world managing Bayern? Because as good as Bayern look and as much talent as they have, when it comes to these tight-knit, well-thought-out Champions League games that at times are almost like chess matches between the best tacticians in Europe, I still have to see Kompany, how he fares against a Pep, how he fares against a Mikel Arteta, how he fares even against a Simone Inzaghi or an Arne Slot or who do we have, a Hansi Flick. How will he kind of fare against them? And they have a big test coming up. They have to travel to the Camp Nou or whatever their new stadium or their temporary stadium is called. They have to face Hansi Flick. They have to face Barca, who look like the hottest team in Europe at the moment. That will be, for me, a big test for Vincent Kompany and a big indicator to tell me, were those years at Burnley and Anderlecht, were they kind of just, look, unfortunate circumstances. It's hard to have massive success with them. Or will it show me, is this job a bit too soon for you? We'll see, though. But one thing's for sure, Bayern at the moment, red hot. Score 9 goals. Insanity. And then finally, the last thing that I kind of took away from this Champions League first day, Aston Villa, first game back in Champions League, or I guess the European Cup for them, and God knows how long. Obviously, they have heritage in this competition, no matter how far back you go. Like, they've won it. A lot of teams can't say that. But wow, what a way to kind of announce your comeback to Europe's biggest stage. Dismantling young boys with absolutely no problem whatsoever. And my big takeaway from this, is I think we looked at Villa this year, both in the Premier League and both how they would fare in Europe, and said, yes, they were good in the Prem, but can they handle European competition? Can they do it a second year in a row? And I think a big part of that is due to how much Newcastle struggled last year when they were in the Champions League and how they fared in Europe, or in England, excuse me. Well, 2 things off that, right? First and foremost, Newcastle were put in the group of death last year. They had to play PSG. They had to play finalist Borussia Dortmund. They had to go to the San Siro and play Milan. That's a tough group. And yes, it didn't go well for them, but it was also very tough for them. Secondly, Newcastle faced as many injuries as anybody last year. They faced a suspension to their biggest transfer signing in Sandro Tonali. So I don't think last year was the best indicator to kind of see what a new team could do when they kind of had to balance out Europe and the Premier League. And I think Villa, for a number of reasons, will fare a lot better than Newcastle, both in the Premier League and in Europe. First and foremost, Unai Emery is not Eddie Howe. And I mean that with no disrespect to Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe is a very, very competent manager. He's proven to be extremely successful so far in the Premier League. But he's not Unai Emery. He doesn't have the European pedigree as Unai Emery. He doesn't have the experience as Unai Emery. He's not a winner like Unai Emery. Fact. And you just look at how confident and how mature Aston Villa dealt with the occasion on their first night back on Europe's grandest stage. I think it just shows you that Unai Emery has this team ready to compete on all fronts again this year. They've looked very, very good in the Premier League. For me, better than they did last year. They've made some big additions, most notably in the middle of the park with Amadou Onana, who grabbed a goal on his European debut last night. He's looking to be one of the bargains of the summer, to be honest with you, man. Like, Onana has taken to life so well at Villa since he's come in. You look at Yuri Tielemans next to him, looks better than ever, kind of with that big physical guy next to him. It lessens the athletic load that Tielemans has to face on a day-to-day basis. John Duran obviously had that goal disallowed, but he looks incredible. Villa, just in general, man, I think they're going to have a very good season, both in the Champions League and in the league. Like, I think a lot of people probably wrote them off, like we do typically with these teams when it comes to the Premier League. Like, oh, United will finish above them, or Chelsea will finish above them, Spurs will. Why? Because of the name. Based on the way they play, based on the manager that they have, based on even the players that they have, Villa can compete with any of these teams, man. And I think it's been very quick to identify that Villa are not going to be a team that are here one year and gone the next. I think they're here to stay. I do. Very, very impressive. Those are my big takeaways from the first day of the Champions League. Let me know what you guys think about them. Did I miss anything? Have I got anything wrong? Anything I may have missed? Let me know as well too what you guys think of these like mini roundups. Would you prefer like the overall game ones like I've done? If I had done instead Liverpool versus Milan, what we learned. Would you guys prefer that? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you as well for 20K subscribers. This channel is growing so quickly, and I can't do it without your guys' help. Like, share, subscribe. Check me out on Twitch on the daily, and I'll see you next time. Peace.